Mayoral Memo with Matho Dickerson from Dubbo Regional Council. .5 Triple M. I'm joined by the Mayor of Dubbo, Mr. Matthew Dickerson. How are you, sir?
Very good this morning. Thank you, Matho. How are you going?
Oh, no complaints, mate. Just excited for tonight's game. It's swept everyone up, I think.
Yeah, that's right. Matilda's fever is very exciting, isn't it? Even just watching the penalty shootout last weekend, You're on the edge of your seat. Just imagine the tension from all the players. Like, it was hard enough watching the game, but imagine being one of the players.
Oh, it was too stressful for me. Yeah. I can't do that stuff anymore. Let's talk about what's happening around town, and some new rule changes to Australia Day means we have a different type of service now.
Well, we may have. We've got to make the final decision on this. Last year, we talked about changing the Australia Day ceremony to be a twilight event in both Dubbo and Wellington, but we were snookered by the Department of Home Affairs and the Australian Citizenship Ceremonies Code. So we had a few arguments with the Department of Home Affairs. We lost those arguments. So we ended up running the Wellington Australia Day ceremony this year on the 25th of January as a twilight event, and then in Dubbo it was held on the 26th. But they changed the rules. Andrew Giles, the Minister, made a change and said you've got 3 days before Australia Day or 3 days after Australia Day that you can hold your ceremony. So that gives us a bit more flexibility for 2024. So we went through a committee meeting a week or so ago and discussed it, and the first vote was 5-4. We discussed it a bit further. We had another vote, 7-2. So I'm not quite sure where councils are headed on this one. At this stage, the recommendation, but again, it was a tight vote, is that we'll have the Wellington ceremony the night before again and the Dubbo ceremony on the day, the same as we had this year, but that's not the final resolution of council. So talk to your local councillors, have a word to them, because the final vote will be the next council meeting, which is Thursday week away, and that'll be the time when we make a final decision as to when we'll have those Australia Day ceremonies.
Okay, very interesting. It'll be interesting to see the outcome of that. Now, there's something a little bit lighter. There's been a competition for some new rhinos that the school kids have got involved in. Yeah,
this was a competition specifically for the school kids. We've just noticed some of the rhinos on the entrances to Dubbo are getting a bit tired. The designs have been there for a while now, a number of years, and people stop on the side of the road and have a photo with them, which is fantastic. They probably climb on them, touch them, and eventually that starts to wear out the designs. We put a competition out to the school kids and said, we want your designs with the story behind it to put on the new, or to update those rhinos on the existing rhinos. And so that was very well received. Lots of entries came in. I had the pleasure of sitting on that judging panel with all my artistic skills and background. But it was good to have a look at those designs. We had some people who did actually know what they were talking about from an artistic point of view. But it was actually quite fascinating. I loved seeing the designs. I loved reading the stories in terms of the background. And I reckon there could have been at least 6 that would have been fantastic designs to go on there. But we had to narrow it down to 3. So we've chosen those 3. We're now talking to those school kids that have won those prizes. So they won $200 gift voucher for each of those 3 kids. And then the next step is we'll take it to artists and say, here's the design on paper. Please transfer that to these rhinos. And then those kids will see their 2D designs end up being 3D designs on the actual rhinos, and we'll get some new refreshed rhinos.
That sounds pretty awesome to have new fresh rhinos. Now, quickly tell us, you went to Canberra and you shook down a couple of ministers.
It was actually made very clear to us that they won't accept a shakedown anymore. One of the things that was told to us by some of the advisors, when you come into the ministers, don't come in and say, by the way, we've got some money we need for this. Please say yes to this grant application, because they want to get away from the good old days where you knocked on a minister's door, said, how you going, minister? Gee, I like that tie you're wearing, or you're looking good today, and you walk out with a promise of a couple of $1 million. So now they're very much basing it on all the data, on an assessment process. And one of the things that I really do like is they've changed the assessment process for one of the grants in particular that it gets you away from having to put a full-blown submission in first, because you really don't know how you're going to go on a grant submission. So you put the grant submissions in, but it costs you a lot of money. For some of the grants, the amount of data and information they want, it costs a lot of money to put a grant in. Some councils, in the past, I know Dubbo's done this as well, where you say, we can't afford to put that grant application in, which sounds crazy because you want the money, but can you afford to put that in on a wing and a prayer? So they've now got a new process with one of these grants in particular that does an EOI process. So you put an expression of interest in, you give an overview of the grant that you're applying for in terms of how your project might apply to that particular grant. And from there, they'll come back and give you a red light or a green light. They'll say, don't go any further. We've had a bit of a look and no, you're not going to get the grant. So you don't waste any more money on going down the full-blown application path. You might get an answer back that says, yep, if this all matches up the way it looks so far and all the data matches up, then, yep, you've got a pretty good chance of getting this. It doesn't guarantee you'll get it, but it's then worth investing the money because you're a better than even chance of actually getting that grant. So I actually particularly liked that process, and I think if more grants are done like that, and also if grants are fairer, because no one wants a situation like down in Wagga, apart from the people in Wagga. Everyone says it's got to be a fair, transparent process. You don't want someone knocking on the Premier's door and saying, hey, can you look after me? Give me a grant for some shooting event or some shooting infrastructure in Wagga. Because again, it's great if you're in Wagga, but it's got to be a fair way of distributing public money.
Fair and saving money, it's unheard of. So we'll see whether or not that's going to work. Thank you so much, Mayor of Dubbo, Matthew Dickerson, for joining us today.
Always my pleasure, Matho.
Mayoral Memo with Matthew Dickerson from Dubbo Regional Council.